Okay. Barbara, are we ready?
Yes, Mr. Chair, I started your recording.
Thank you. All right, I'm going to go ahead and call this Rules Committee meeting to order. Before we do the roll call, just to make this a little easier, I do know that Assembly members Austin Quinn Davidson, Cameron Perez Verdia, Meg Zalatel, and Christopher Constant will not be able to attend for a variety of different reasons. So we can take them off the list for roll call. Let's go ahead and do a roll call.
Mr. Rivera.
Present.
Miss Allard.
Here.
Mr. Dunbar.
Here.
Miss Kennedy.
Here.
Miss LaFrance.
Here.
Mr. Peterson.
Present.
And Mr. Weddleton. It looks like you have a quorum, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Three things before we get started through the agenda. So first is queue. So just like normal, if you want to get in the queue, please put yourself in the chat. Substantive comments, though, should be noted on the record, though. Then, just like I like doing with all of these rules committee meetings, I am okay with a little bit more informality in order to promote more dialogue. So no need for the Mr. Chairs or Mr. or Miss this or that. Third, like I said at the beginning of the meeting, we have quite a few members who aren't here. So we are going to have as robust of a dialogue as we possibly can today, but that means I'm going to have to do a lot more personal outreach to the members who were not here to add their inputs. When I also note we've been joined by Mr. See, I broke my own rule, by John Weddleton. But as I was saying, a lot of members not here today, so we'll have a good discussion, and I need to do a lot of outreach with the other members before I really can get a sense on some of these things of how we're going to be moving. So let's go ahead and go through the agenda, starting with a report from the Assembly Chair and Municipal Clerk. So I'm going to start with reopening of the Assembly chambers. So before I go into the protocols that were developed by the administration, I just want to be very transparent on the communications and considerations that Assembly leadership took on this matter. So over the last 2 weeks or so, I have asked the administration about protocols for reopening the chambers. I think by happenstance, I did receive a hint of what the protocols might look like just prior to the May 19th meeting, but I was not given the actual protocols as developed and laid out in the press release that went out earlier today until Wednesday, so 2 days ago. So just in case anyone thinks that they weren't left in the loop on this, this is just 2 days ago when all of this really began in earnest. So from Wednesday and through even earlier today, I've had back and forth dialogue with the administration and have received some pretty excellent guidance from the clerk, Assembly Council, and the Vice Chair on this matter. I'll continue this dialogue with the administration at a regular leadership meeting later today. With that, I just want to quickly go through the protocols for members who maybe didn't see it. So and this is for anyone, right? Municipal employees, assembly members, members of the public who want to enter the assembly chambers, the library. So we've already been doing face coverings, right? So that's nothing new. The two additions, which I think for folks who have read the various different protocols the city has developed, aren't going to be new protocols. So the contact tracing log, and then the pre-screening temperature checks. So those are two additions which the administration included in the protocols. And we, of course, will still be doing the phone testimony and email testimony for folks who want to participate in those fashions. So that is just a quick update on the reopening of the Assembly chambers. Looking forward to, as people are comfortable, seeing them in person. A few other things to report for the Assembly Chair report. So on a couple of leadership goals, Austin and I have begun working on what we're calling sort of the quarterly comprehensive update of our adopted 2019-2021 Assembly priorities. So our goal is to get this out by the end of June or early July. I'm going to be working with committee leadership and the administration in assisting Austin and me in crafting this update. And in short, the framework we have developed is simply an update on our short-term and our long-term goals and responding to the accountability measures that we agreed upon. So that's going to be something that committee leadership, you'll be hearing more from me about. I'll be reaching out to you individually. Austin and I have also reviewed the press list, which was part of our leadership goals, and suggested additions to the list, which was already fairly comprehensive. If members have suggestions for the press list, please send them to Austin and me, and we're happy to get those included. And then last, Assembly Chair update, members should have received an updated individual expense account memo. The only change in the memo is a relaxing on the rules of where you can travel, with the understanding that you must follow the MOA's travel expense policies. That is it for my Assembly Chair report. Next, we're going to turn to the report from the municipal clerk, and I just want to acknowledge the amazing amount of work that we, and really probably 90% of it is me, have asked the clerk to do over the last few weeks as we think about reopening and all of the other work that we are doing. So I think it's really important to realize this. Barbara doesn't like talking about this publicly, but there is simply no comparison to workload between what we are asking the clerk's office to do now and what they did years ago. So a huge thanks to her and her team, and in an effort to keep the members updated on the projects the clerk's office is working on that have been raised by assembly members, I've added this section to our agenda so Barbara can report directly to everyone on these different projects. So with that, I'll turn it over to Barbara.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. That's very kind of you. I think we have a really amazing team in the clerk's office that makes so much of this happen. I have three things that I'd like to report to the Assembly. First, we're working on our COVID return to work plans, and I think those are going fairly well. We are looking to having our staff coming back, mostly part-time. Some will be full-time in their respective offices. The election team will not be returning to City Hall because we can maintain social distancing down here, and it gives us more room at City Hall to maintain social distancing as well. I will keep you posted on that. Again, we're still not 100% back in the office, and so that does have some implications for how staff is able to support you. But I think they've done an amazing job over the last 2.5 months doing it remotely. The second thing that I wanted to talk to you about is that we are working on what I am calling some new task-based teams in the clerk's office. I think you all know I'm a big teamwork and team-oriented manager. We have the election team, we have the agenda team, we have the business licensing team. Well, some of you know we have the communications team. And so Jennifer is the team lead for the communications team. And then Mandy is the web editing team lead. And then Kiana and Travis are on the social media team. And the reason that we're focusing on these task-based teams is I think we can really leverage our staff to really do some things that are hopefully enjoyable, but it's not specifically related to their functional tasks such as agenda or elections. So you may be hearing more about that in the near future. The third thing that I wanted to talk to you about is the Agenda Evolution Project and the update for the Assembly Chambers. Things are going. I asked the project manager to let me know if we're behind. There certainly have been a couple of minor delays, but nothing that they wanted me to alert you about that would delay the project. So we're still on task to go live on July 28th. But I'm just letting you know it's an amazing amount of work, but I think that the outcome is going to be really good. We took to heart all of your comments at the last meeting, and we're continuing to work on some of those projects. We're making progress on the project to make documents available to the public. We're starting a new project for that. We're a little bit slower and don't have a resolution for the rolling screen. So, but we'll keep you posted on all of that. And that's it from me. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Great, thank you, Barbara. Okay, so that's it for that section of the agenda. Moving on to assembly priorities. So for this section of the meeting, I want to focus on an update of the 2020 budget priorities memo, as was outlined in the email from Suzanne early in the month that was sent through Desiree. I think she sent it on behalf of Suzanne. We'll be working over the next month to update this memo and send it to the administration in late June or early July. So the clerk's office should have emailed out the 2019-21 assembly 2021 assembly priorities and the 2020 budget priorities memo earlier today. If y'all want to pull those documents up on your computers. The way that I want to conduct this conversation is to start by looking at the 2020 memo, provide any critiques or thoughts that you guys have on that. Then move on to going through each of the priorities and asking the committee leadership, most obviously attached to each priority, to begin the discussion. And I think for some of these, we aren't going to have any, so it might just be me making it up. But let's go ahead and start with a review of the 2020 memo. So does everyone have that?
Felix, I'm not sure. I'm looking at an email. Oh, sorry, this is Weddleton. And I have August 2nd letter and then the AR 2019-436. That was an email today at noon.
Yeah, so it's the August 2nd letter.
There are more. It says 2 attachments. So.
Mr. Chair, do you want me to share this?
Understood.
Yeah, and John, I don't know if it's on your screen too. I don't know if you can see it. Barbara has it shared.
Yeah, I've got that on both screens now. Thank you.
Great. Okay, so I guess just to do a quick review of this, just in case folks haven't looked at this in a while. So this was a process that at the time, Suzanne as the vice chair and I worked on, where we had conversations with the committee chairs and with the whole body in a couple of rules committee meetings where we developed this memo. And obviously the process wasn't perfect, right? There were a few hitches to the process, which is why I think we've developed a little bit more comprehensive of a process that will, I hope, get everyone's thoughts. And we only include things in this that the members are, it's obviously in our priorities, right? So it fits with public safety, homelessness, quality of life, economic development. So our priorities that we had developed, each of them had different budget priorities within them. I'm not going to really go through the 2020 memo point by point. I will let the members, if they have any initial thoughts on the 2020 memo, feel free to put yourself in the queue or just let us know now. We can be a little bit more informal that way. So any thoughts on this? There's I guess, one addition. So there is a second follow-up to this, which was after the budget was released, which of these actual pieces were included in the budget or not. And so we can make sure that that gets sent out to the members. Barbara, if we could do that, please. Doesn't have to be now, but eventually. I will say, you know, for the part, some of the stuff did get included in the budget. Some of it got included in amendments. I'll just use the public safety section. The ACES work, that got included in an amendment. Trail safety, that got included in the actual budget process. So, and that's just for the public safety section. So each section is going to have a different story to tell. I'm not hearing anyone who wants to comment on the 2020, but I'll shut up and I'll see if anyone wants to.
Hey, Felix, it's Suzanne. I have a question.
Yeah.
So the memo last year, we focused on these 4 areas, and we also have communication, which I know is being worked separately or with a subcommittee, but that also, I think, has a need for budget resources. Would we potentially address communication in this part of the process as well, or will we handle that separately?
So yes, I actually, again, I was hoping Meg would be here so she could talk about communications, but basically what I was hoping to do after we finish talking about the 2020 memo, which we might be if no one else wants to add, is go through each of the priorities as outlined in the document, including communications, and see if we want to include anything in the memo.
Okay, thanks. That makes sense.
Okay, so I'm not hearing anyone that wants to chime in. So let's go ahead and move on. We're just going to start with communications. And so for this, if folks can flip to the actual priorities document. And so Barbara, I don't, actually this might be good if you just flip to it and I'll tell you which pages to go to. So for communications, and in short, we're going to look at the short-term, long-term goals for each of these. So for communications, short-term goals, so the rolling agenda in the communications document for short-term goals is one that I know both Meg and Austin, who are 2 members of the communications subcommittee, and Chris is the 3rd one. So all of our communications subcommittee is not here. But I know that at least the 2 of them are very keen on having this rolling agenda item. And in short, what that is their concept was to have a screen outside the chambers. So for folks coming in to the chambers so that they could see what agenda item we're on, if agenda items have been moved around. So if we've changed the order of the day so that people could see, oh, the item I wanted to speak is now no longer going to be coming up. Now it's going to be coming up at the end of the meeting. And maybe there were a couple other things. Barbara, I know you have worked with them on this. Is there anything that I'm missing?
Mr. Chair, I think there was the Assembly Navigator project was one, the emails update, the automated email update was another. A newsletter format was another. I think those were a few of them.
Yes. On the other different goals, agreed. I think a lot of those, though, we don't need to, I don't think any of those are money kind of expense, but I think the rolling screen one is an expense because, and Barbara, correct me if I'm wrong, but the agenda evolution project that you talked about earlier likely is not going to include money for the rolling screen idea.
That is unclear, Mr. Chair. But the rolling screen is probably not included. There will probably not be any money left over from agenda evolution for that project. You are probably correct.
Okay, so I guess just trying to embody Meg and Austin, I think both of them would probably advocate for inclusion of that. Then just looking at some of these other communications, yeah, none of these are money related for the short term. The long term is money. So working on an overhaul of the website, that's money. And creating an electronic method for providing public notice to community councils. I don't know if that's money. I'd have to ask IT that, but it might be. So that is the budget stuff as it relates to communications. Any comments on that stuff? Should it be included? Should it not be included in our 2021 memo?
Felix, it's Suzanne.
Yeah, go ahead.
I very much support including definitely any costs associated with the scrolling screen. And then I don't know what form it would take, for the website, but I continue to receive comments from constituents where they can't find stuff online and there are some dead links. And I know that IT largely manages the website, but I really feel strongly that we need to do something to make our website, the city's website, more effective and a useful tool for constituents. But I don't know what costs or what resources IT has, or the I-team too. I know we had a conversation with them about finding technological solutions to some of these constituent issues. But anyway, so yeah, I'm definitely in support of at least talking more about that piece concerning the website.
Mr.
Cool.
Chair,
Thanks.
Felix. Felix, this is Crystal.
Oh, yeah, go ahead, Crystal.
Thanks. I would agree with that. The website's pretty frustrating. Unless you already know where something is, it's usually hard to find it. So navigating it can take you through about 3 or 4 or 5 different pages to get to the information you want. So anything that can be done to simplify that. And I think it's also true that there have been several times when I've clicked on a link and it just went to nothing, just said, sorry, this is unavailable. So all of those things really do have to be fixed. So I don't know what that costs either, to have somebody that's just a full-time web person. But the other part of that that's kind of a little bit problematic is the length of time it takes for any of the changes to the ordinances that the assembly approves. It takes a long time for that information to get uploaded into the Muni code as well. So both of those things I think are really important. So anyway, I agree with Suzanne. I don't know what any of that costs. Maybe we need 3 or 4 web people. I don't know, but those are important. I know this is a little bit of a general phrase too, though, but I kind of wanted to get part of this conversation going too, is, there are certainly a lot of things we can put on our wish list, but I am of the mindset that we are really actually going to have to get a whole lot more basic than what we would like to see. I'm afraid we're going to be looking at kind of like what we can't afford right now. So that's kind of been my approach since all this COVID stuff started and we realized we were losing businesses, or at least businesses were struggling. So knowing that there's a revenue problem that is going to hit the municipality, I think we need to first and foremost recognize that the shortfall that we could be dealing with is probably the bigger question. So even though it's good, I think, to talk about some of the things we'd like to prioritize, we may actually be doing that, but along the same lines, we need to have the conversation about, okay, what are we then going to do without? Because we cannot increase the budget. We cannot expect to get revenue from sources that just aren't there right now. So I guess I want to just kind of start off with a little bit of, well, I don't know if we have to start off with that kind of a conversation, but I just want people to know that that's really where I'm coming from. It's not so much what we should do, but it's more of what can't we do now. So thanks.
Thanks. Yeah, and I guess and I will ask Suzanne to jump in after me, but so part of the discussions that we've had with the administration, Suzanne Austin and I, and Suzanne in her capacity as the budget and finance chair, is we are likely gonna need to have sort of both conversations as things evolve, but in terms of how we want to move our city forward, the administration really strongly recommends that the assembly sort of uh, stamps puts its stamp down on what we want to do, and so that looks like to me sort of figuring out this next iteration of the budget priorities, because it's actually something that the administration appreciates. And maybe I should have started with this a little bit. So during our last budget cycle, I don't know how many times the mayor said things like, if the assembly has a priority, it needs to let us know. And so, and this was all in context of before building the budget, right? Because it's so much more difficult to let the administration know our priorities after they build the budget. So I think we are doing this exercise in response to the mayor making that request sort of multiple times during the 2020 budget cycle. Particularly he was talking about it when it came to like police force size and a few other issues of that came up. He was pretty clear that the administration will craft a budget based on the priorities that the assembly lets the administration know, and along with whatever other priorities the administration itself has. So yeah, I appreciate that perspective of we need to do both of these things. Suzanne, did you want to add anything?
Oh, thanks, Felix. I would just agree that it is really important for us to convey what's important to us as a body, so that it's integrated into the early formulation of the budget, and not just an add-on at the end through amendments. So the sooner we can do that, I agree, Felix, the better. I appreciate Crystal's point about a potential budget shortfall. And it is really difficult right now to know where we're going to land on revenues, with so much still up in the air, and we haven't received that information yet, and we won't get it until next month in all likelihood. And we still don't know what gaps the C-19 relief funding will be able to fill. So while there's a lot unknown, I agree. I think we do especially need to keep our budget priorities front and center to ensure that whatever operational resources we have left at the end of the day, we are putting them exactly where they need to be, and where we want them to go.
So Felix, can I chime in again?
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, then to me, then the conversation needs to shift. If we're really talking about budget priorities, then we ought to be looking at the basics. I mean, isn't being able to fill potholes and do road construction, isn't that a priority? Isn't it a priority to make sure we have the level of emergency responders necessary to respond to anything and everything in the community? I mean, it seems like we're having conversations about what else we would like to see, not necessarily what we're really prioritizing. So I guess I'm kind of thinking, I mean, typically I know that's what you do. You say, well, hey, we need to do more of this, or we need to add this, or we need to have some more of that. But if we're really trying to talk about prioritizing, then we should be, speaking about what really are the basics. What's the foundations to this kind of a budget? What do we want to see absolutely protected in case there is that shortfall that might be coming? So it seems to me we really are having a conversation about what else we would like to add to the budget. That's what I'm hearing. So.
Thanks, Crystal. Suzanne?
Thanks, Felix. I don't want to jump ahead necessarily, but per Crystal's comment about focusing on the basics, the top priority that Austin and I as co-chairs of the Health Policy Committee were going to lead with was to maintain the continuation budget funding levels of the Anchorage Health Department to provide the critical services that support the core functions. And then we're also looking at any gaps that have been exposed, like from the pandemic. I know Director Pineda has mentioned an epidemiologist and a data professional a few times as something that would better position the department to respond in these types of emergency situations and for other proactive work as well. So in that committee, that's definitely our starting point. And from there, we are taking a look at how the priorities that we identified last year in those sessions are best supported by programs that are offered through the health department, and as well as our longer term goals. I think that Lance Wilbur had made a really good point about how we are in crisis mode. We have to make sure we get through this current situation, but we also have to keep looking out to the future as well, because if we're not planning and doing some of that early investment, right, we all know that the cost just gets higher for some things. So I think it is a balance of preparing for these shortcomings, making sure the core functions are funded, and then also working towards these longer term goals, and maybe in small steps, and it may be articulating some big ideas that are going to take years to fund or get off the ground.
Thanks. Pete?
Thanks, Felix. Well, and I just think that the taxpayers are going to be expecting us to, show some leadership and try to find, things that we can do without. I mean, we don't know at this point how fast or how much the economy is going to come back, or how much revenue we're going to lose from gas taxes, room taxes, car taxes, etc. And but I think we can expect that we're going to have to be sort of a more lean assembly department in the future, and more lean assembly budget in the future. I think that's just the reality of the situation. Thanks.
Thanks, Pete. Any other comments on this sort of general philosophical discussion before we continue?
I just want to agree with Pete. Thanks.
Thanks. All right, I'm not hearing anyone else chime in, so we'll keep going. And like I said, we're gonna have a whole month to keep talking about this. So I at least want to try to get people's initial ideas. Okay, so let's go ahead and move on to homelessness, which, again, I guess I'll be making that up on the spot. So Barbara, can you go to page 5, bottom of page 5, short-term, long-term goals? Thanks. Okay, so in terms of funding here, and I guess sort of looking in comparison to what we had talked about in the last memo, okay, so one of these pieces talks, at least I think in the long term, of the day center. So we did fund that through the amendment process. The day engagement center. What other stuff needs money in here? So we have talked about in the past, and I think it might have been included in last year's memo, but of funding some of the operations of the Anchorage Coalition to End Homelessness. Yeah, and it's included here in the short-term goals. I don't think many of the other goals are money. On the long-term goal, oh, sorry, who's that?
Yeah, I was just saying, I think you misspelled holistic there under long-term goals.
Awesome, thanks. Good catch. This is a living document. Just gonna make a note of that. On page 5, long-term. Okay.
Felix?
Yeah, go ahead, Crystal.
I think, well, just from being a fairly new assembly member and watching a lot of this process move forward in terms of dealing with homelessness, I have felt like there was so much disconnect, even a year ago, and now I see so much more of a better picture of how this is all being approached. And I've really appreciated that, especially the people that have worked really hard to make that happen. But I think we've also learned a lot during the COVID response. And it seemed like the one thing that, from what I've read from some of the people who've been involved and engaged with this, the one thing that they're really seeing they believe has been making a difference is that real outreach component. And if we have more people who are doing that and really making that face-to-face contact, it seems like that's when they can make progress. And so I don't know if there's something that's budget oriented in that respect, or if that's a way to maybe realign current funding, maybe redirect some funding into that effort. But with as many different organizations that are involved, and the potential for having a lot of help and resources out there in the community, if anything, we might want to put some kind of a priority on our budget in just to making those connections happen. So, I'm not necessarily saying that we need more middlemen, middle level management in the process, but I do think that what we've learned is that actual contact between individuals and somebody who knows what the resources are has been really valuable. So I guess that would just be a comment in terms of how we can maybe help craft the budget a little bit to make sure that engagement piece happens. So thank you.
Cool. Yeah, thanks, Crystal. And I guess my addition to that is, so in the first quarter budget revisions, we did fund some outreach, 180,000. And I just got news earlier today that the RFPs for that went out. So that money should be, the program should be rolling out by July 1 or so. So agreed, we made it a priority for this last budget, and so maybe we need to make it a priority again for this next budget. So I guess the only other thing, just looking at the last memo, we did make it a priority on some data pieces, particularly if you look at the long-term goals. A lot of that is analysis and data to help as we figure out some of our long-term solutions. So that's just another thing that I'll throw out there. Then in the last memo, day shelter was a priority, which, it's in here under our long-term goals. So any other thoughts on homelessness priorities for the budget?
Weddleton, can I speak?
Yeah, go ahead, John.
Not sure it's on here, but it's something I don't want to get lost. And I know we're doing the alcohol tax thing, and that might be in there, but the community service patrol south of Tudor should be up there somewhere. And that's a budget cost somewhere, but presumably we're told it's a reduction at the fire department as well. that might be balancing it out.
Okay.
I don't know if that's homelessness. That's drunk people who fell down. Need to get picked up.
Sure. Thanks, John. And yeah, I don't think that was included in our last 2020 memo. All right, any other thoughts on homelessness before we move on? All right, so then the next one is quality of life. So Barbara, that's page 7, sort of the middle-ish of page 7. And so for the 2020 memo, what we had was no cuts to the library, which I believe was achieved. And this one we didn't really have well thought out yet, and I still don't think we have it necessarily well thought out, but staffing commission rate related to the quality of life. And, you know, as you can see, quality of life on the agenda is the one that doesn't have any names next to it, because there really isn't a committee that's its primary function is to focus on quality of life. It's sort of interspersed among many different conversations, or in really none at all. Public transit isn't in any committee's jurisdiction. Parks and Rec isn't in any committee's jurisdiction. Those are some of the things you think about when it comes to quality of life. So those were the two things included in the 2020 memo. Barbara, can you scroll down a little bit? I need to see the short-term and long-term goals. Thanks. So I think the one thing that we did fund as a priority, but it wasn't in the memo necessarily, was public transit options. So we did fund that through a budget amendment. And so is that something that we want to include in the priority? You know, that's an open question. Otherwise, I don't know if there's any other funding sort of money pieces. I think a lot of it is staff work, which I suppose is money in the end. So any thoughts from the members on this one?
Okay, Felix, this is Crystal.
Yeah. Go ahead, Crystal.
I guess, you know, for me, part of the quality of life overlaps into economic development and public safety. And so to a certain extent, this one probably would take us back to public safety. And I should have mentioned this before. I have some concerns about just fire safety right now. You know, we really are just about to head into, you know, high fire danger months. And, you know, obviously that has a huge impact on quality of life, whether it's air quality or just people's safety. But anyway, I guess I'm just kind of throwing that out there. Just, this was a conversation that I haven't been able to have yet, but just wanted to pick Chief Hetrick's brain a little bit about how we can be better prepared for fire season this year, what we can do to make people more alert, more aware. You know, kind of goes into even some of that emergency preparedness type of stuff, which I think does fall into quality of life issues as well. So I guess I don't really know if there's a specific amount of money that we should try to set aside for dealing with this. And I don't even know what kind of program or what, but I guess I'm just throwing it out there right now just to kind of make people think a little bit about, you know, where we are in terms of a community that does have that risk of high fire danger. So I'll just kind of make it a thought. If somebody has some good ideas about how we could really try to beef up some of our fire awareness and fire preparation security, that might be a good thing. But anyway, that's something that's been on my mind lately, is just that fire, wildfire danger awareness. So thanks.
Thanks. And I see that both of our South Anchorage Assembly members are in the queue because they love talking about this subject. So Suzanne?
Thanks, Felix. And thanks, Crystal, for bringing up the issue of fire danger. think that resiliency and also taking a look at how we engage with the emergency center or the OEM is important, and whether that's a part of public safety or fits into quality of life. As long as we have this in here and identify some kind of programmatic way forward so that we're addressing issues such as fire danger, I'm good with whichever bucket it ends up in. And then actually, Felix, I'd wanted to comment too on quality of life. And I think actually it was Crystal who mentioned how these items blur, or maybe it was you, into other areas. We had added on our health policy committee initial priorities pre-K and childcare. And I don't need to make the argument now, but at some point, I think it fits both quality of life and economic development. And so we're likely to propose it go into both. And I know we don't have it here listed on short-term or long-term goals. And I don't know if, we would just, for those that don't clearly fit one way or the other, if we just, I don't know how we decide where it goes. But I would like to add pre-K and childcare somewhere in here. Thanks.
Thanks. John? And then I guess, John, before you go, sorry that you have to leave, Forrest. I guess there's a lot going on today. And like I said, I will be having a lot of other conversations with the members who couldn't be here or stay for the full time. Go ahead, John. You're muted. Did we lose you, John?
Oh, unmute. As you expected, a little bit on wildfire. And just for Crystal, the Rabbit Creek Community Council has done amazing work across the hillside, getting people rallied about the resiliency, largely wildfire, but also earthquakes and other things that could happen that could trap us on dead-end streets and so on. And one of the outcomes of that was that ballot measure that just squeaked by to allow us to do life safety roads. And it would be good if you have some real active community council or subversive people to get in touch with Kai Holland and maybe try to replicate to the north there what he's doing down at the south end. And he's gotten grants, and it's been, it's a long haul to get everything really working, but he's been very effective in getting word out. Thanks.
Thanks, John.
Can I tag on, Felix?
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, and I appreciate that, and I agree, John, with what you said in terms of what Rabbit Creek is doing. And I know our Chamber of Commerce is trying to see how to make some good connections and maybe promote more fire safety. But I guess I'm just wondering, just in terms of how we could potentially beef up our fire department, especially in those areas where, I worry a lot about down Eagle River Road, because, I've got 17 miles worth of basically one way in, one way out, with one fire station at the very beginning of that road. And so it's a lot to think about in terms of down Eagle River Valley. So I'm just trying to think, if there were ways, and like I said, I had to have this conversation with Chief Hedrick, so that would be really helpful, I'm sure. But that would be, a potential for how do we have the fire department that we believe is as responsive as possible. I know there's a lot of data that goes into determining what the call volume is. We have so many percentages of calls for doing this and so many percentages of calls for doing that. And that has actually, to me, is just not even part of the conversation. The part of the conversation that's important to me is what capability do we have? What can we respond to, and how quickly and where? And so I guess I'm just looking for some help and direction in making sure that that we really do have that public safety component that can deal with fires in ways that maybe we haven't thought about yet. And it just seems like we're we're in a time and an era where there's a lot of things that people never thought that could happen. Never thought I'd see the day when, and then fill in the blank. And of course, we're in one of those eras right now with COVID. So I just want to be as best prepared for any kind of fire issue that we think we might face. So I'm just kind of looking for how to make sure we prioritize things in the budget that might help lead us to that more, a point of better safety. So thanks.
Thank you. All right, any other comments on quality of life before we move on? Yeah, Pete?
Thank you. And I just wanted to say, well, Mr. Dunbar and I have Stuckagon Heights in our district as well. And if you haven't been on that road up there, there's one road in and out, and it's pretty hilly and curvy. And if you got smoke making it hard to see, that'd be really, really difficult to evacuate from there in a hurry. So yeah, it's a problem. But the FireWise program that the AFD, the fire department, has with John C., I believe his name is very popular, and I think he's got a waiting list. So we definitely want to make sure we continue to fund that program. Thank you.
Well,
Thank you.
if there's a waiting list, is that something then that we should try to reconcile? Maybe we can help take care of the waiting list, but just a thought.
Yeah, good point. Thanks. All right, I'm not hearing anything else on quality of life. So let's go ahead and move on to one that I won't be leading, which is public safety. So Cameron isn't here, so it's you're on, Crystal. So if we can go down to the short-term, long-term goals, Barbara, on this one.
So Felix
Thanks.
and everybody, we haven't had a whole lot of conversation about this yet at the committee level. As you know, we just, Cameron and I just took on the committee together, had our first meeting last month, and basically focused on just trying to kind of do a lot of introductions and overviews and kind of some preliminary conversations about the alcohol tax. So I feel like we haven't really delved into this very well at this point. But I will say there, besides talking about fire safety, I think one of the other things that I want to talk about is going to be in regard to the police department. And I don't know if all of you got the response from Chief Dahl today or not, kind of his view, his thoughts on what had happened in Minneapolis, or what is happening in Minneapolis. And I really appreciated his kind of proactive response on that, because one of the things that I wanted to do was have him into the Public Safety Committee to just talk about, so who is our police department, and what kind of relationship do they have with the community, and how do we keep something like that from happening? So it sounds like Chief Dahl says they've had multiple conversations about those kinds of relationships that could or couldn't exist, and do a lot of cultural awareness. They do a lot of just really paying attention to their responses in situations, and sounds like they debrief a lot of those situations. And anyway, so it was all good news. But anyway, so there may be something that we talk about from that perspective that could have an implication to the budget, maybe for more training capability, or maybe, I don't know, maybe there's a need for more psychiatrists in APD just to help them deal with some of the things that they face on a daily basis. But we'll have that conversation next Wednesday. I'm just going to let the chief kind of say what he wants to say about that situation, and about the situation here with our own department. And I think something could come out of that conversation about where some of the needs in the police department could be. Doesn't sound like there is any really right now, but it'll be a good conversation. So if I can just beg to be off the hook on this one for a little bit longer, then it'll probably be a better conversation and more information coming forward later. Thanks.
Great. Yeah, no, and thank you, Crystal, and looking forward to seeing what the committee comes up with. Yeah, and just looking at these short-term, long-term goals, I'm not necessarily sure how many of these might be money-related or not. But just looking at what we achieved in the 2020 memo, we had 4 different priorities that we outlined, and 2 of them got funded. So I feel happy with what we achieved then, and hopefully we can keep making successes in that. John?
A couple of points on that. One, just going back to that Firewise thing, public fire, I guess wildfire would tie into public safety. It's not police, but I am not certain that AFD has really pursued the grant to keep John C. going, and Suzanne may have more information on that, because I know there's been frustration from the Rabbit Creek Community Council about that John's contract hasn't, as small as it is, it's not enough to meet the need, and I don't believe it's been renewed for this season. And you can get so much work out of citizens when they know what to do, and we've seen it, that really leverages a huge amount of value for preventing wildfire. But so I'd like to see that somewhere. It's AFD fund wildfire prevention somehow. And then I still am hearing people frustrated with the police department on some really simple things. They have some kind of event and they say, I want to see the police report on that. And we heard that it could be as long as a year to get a police report, and that they were working on that and hired staff to shorten that. But I heard recently that is still not the case, that they were told it could be up to a year to get a police report. And that this is baffling to me how that could possibly be. But we have in here from, in our assembly goals, fill remaining gaps in non-sworn staff, which I suppose it fits under that, but maybe be a little more explicit that you really need to work on this. Thanks.
Can I comment on that, Felix?
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I've had that conversation, John, with the chief a couple of times, because I've had people too that have complained about not having the ability to get reports, like it's a theft in their house and they want to send in an insurance report and they can't get the police report. But the chief told me that they were really in the process of hiring people and then training them. And he expected it to probably take, a good 6 months to get that department functioning. But the last I heard, I don't know when you heard your information about maybe a recent request for some information, but my understanding is that they have made progress on a lot of that. So I'm happy though to check in with the police chief, because like I said, we're going to have our conversation on Wednesday anyway, and I will ask him about that so that he gets a heads up about it. But that's a good one to bring up, because that's exactly what we talked about last year, that they were so behind in being able to get reports out to people requesting them. So good information to have. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks. And this actually reminds me, so just as an FYI for the members, I am going to be sending for each of the committee chairs, so that they can include this in their conversation, a synopsis of any issues that would fall under their committee for the budget priorities. And so obviously we have Crystal here, so I don't need to send her a synopsis of this conversation, but for homelessness and communications, I will send that team a synopsis of this conversation. Okay, any other public safety budget priorities?
Felix?
Yeah.
We did have the public perception survey on there, and I remember the conversations that we had about that, just kind of trying to take the temperature of the community in terms of what they thought about. I think this was actually geared toward specifically APD, but I don't necessarily know that that's true. But anyway, do you know if there was ever any kind of thought about what something like that would cost, and how we would actually go about putting a survey together and giving public access to it? Do you remember anything?
Yeah,
more
so
about the conversation? Okay.
We didn't evolve that conversation. So the administration decided not to move forward with that priority in the budget. And I will say that this is something that, at least sort of on the Midtown level, so all of the Midtown community councils, Meg and I have talked about putting up together our own survey, working with the different partners, APD, AFD, and other community partners, and having some type of survey being conducted in September in advance of the budget so that we could get some type of better understanding. But that's just for Midtown, that the two of us have talked about that. There hasn't been sort of a holistic approach or discussion on that subject.
Well, that's good to know though, but would there be a desire by other assembly members for the Public Safety Committee to kind of pursue that a little bit and maybe flesh out a little bit of what it might look like from APD and AFD's perspective? Is that still helpful, the idea? I mean, I kind of think there's value in it, but I just thought I'd throw it out there because I don't think it'd be a real expensive thing to do. So anyway.
Yeah, I guess I'll chime in and say that I think it would be very helpful because I think it's important for us to sort of get a very on the ground understanding of the issues that people are facing when it comes to public safety. So for me, that's a yes. And I think some other folks want to chime in too. Suzanne?
Me too. That's a yes, Crystal. Thanks, Felix.
Thanks. And then I think, John, you had wanted to chime in?
No.
Oh, okay, got
Not
it.
on that topic.
Okay, thanks. I think I'll take it to the committee and see what we do with it. So thanks.
Thanks. All right, so not seeing anything else, we'll go ahead and move on to economic development. And so this one is John and Crystal. I'll turn it over to you two.
So jumping into this, I think you got emailed, and maybe it's on the screen or something. When I saw that we were up on this, okay, so I threw together just kind of flipping through notes that I keep over time, and then some other things to see what we might throw in here. And it has Crystal's name at the top, though she never. I sent it this morning, so in all fairness, so what do you think? And haven't heard back, so it should not really have Crystal's name necessarily at the top. But I don't even know if some of these are really things we would ask for funding. It's just some issues that are up there on the CEDC's realm, really, and then taking some of the stuff that was in the request from last year.
So
do you want me through it,
John?
Did people get it?
Yeah, that was going to be my question. So I don't remember seeing an email. Was it sent like a few minutes ago?
Yeah. Barbara, can you
I
put
got
it up?
I got it. And I thought it was good, John. So
Yes, Mr. Chair, I can put it up.
Got it. So it's hard for me to do email and run a meeting. So I just looked at it now.
Fine. Yeah. You should be happy, Felix. I did my homework.
Felix?
Yeah, go ahead.
Thanks. And I think John put some really good things on here, and some of them are probably, there probably are some money involved, budget involved items on here. Especially just the very first one he put down, encourage affordable housing. And from what we heard from some of our roundtable discussions, I think has been a little bit contradictory, but I think it's worth definitely CEDC having a bigger discussion about it. It might be something that we end up disagreeing on with the administration, but the idea that we have higher costs for building houses here than there are in other areas, and but on the other hand, we are seeing the real estate market actually picking up, and those homes in the more affordable range are selling and reselling. So anyway, that's something that if our thoughts are correct about us actually not building affordable housing, but really only seeing a lot of new houses being built in the higher end market, then that could absolutely affect the budget because all of those costs, so to speak, for permitting those houses and doing the inspections is supposed to be a self-sustaining budget. If that's not going to be the case anymore, because we're, even at some point, even the high end buyers are going to stop buying houses because they're going to be done buying houses. But anyway, that I think has some real potential implications to the budget in terms of the kinds of funding we think we can, the revenues we think we can get from the housing market. So the other thing I think is going to be a big conversation is the funding a marijuana commission. And that would take staffing. But I think we're going to have, John, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but we're going to have, maybe this is the place to have that conversation too, but just start it off with, but just the idea of whether or not there's value, real value in having that marijuana commission. But if we do, like I said, there's some staffing requirements that go with that would absolutely impact the budget. So I'll just throw those couple of things out there right now that, like I said, I think will have some potential on the impacts on the budget. So thanks.
Great, thank you. Yeah,
Do you want me to walk down this, Felix, or just let people read it?
I read it, but if you want to highlight through any of the things, feel free to.
Okay, well, I think Crystal touched on some affordable housing, and that should actually be much longer than what's there. And I think a lot of what's here is things that administration is already working on. Video inspections they were working on, and then with COVID, they really ramped it up. Now they're doing them. But that's something that's cheaper for everyone. And we did the 25% reduction in permit fees and then found we have 20% increase in permits, and we're hanging in there. So that should tell us maybe there is a way we can do things better. So that's a good learning there. And then, I list the Bend and Adams report recommendations, but that's kind of a work plan for the administration anyway. So I don't know that we would ask for that in particular. We did with the customer service training, but they're very aware of these things. And then revamp the website. I think we're all on board for that. Marijuana Commission. And then we listed a couple plans that Chris and I know clearly are in works. Chugachingo River Comp Plan Update. Girdwood Comp Plan Update is being mostly funded by donations through a Girdwood group. And I think we pitched in $10,000 through HLB, perhaps a little bit more, but not a lot really. It's mostly a citizen guided effort that I expect to see done not too long from now, a month or so. And then a long time thing is user-friendly guidelines for how rezones work. And we've seen so much confusion from people. That Lewis and Clark one showed that. And something like that's a time saver because it took us a lot of time at the assembly level, I'm sure at the planning commission, at the planning department, because people just don't know how things work. So they have to address these questions over and over again with every rezone. We have an issue in the other category that I would hope would be revenue neutral. But, we have EMT is citywide and fire is most of Anchorage, but a lot of Anchorage isn't in the fire service area, like Turnagain Arms, some part of Eagle River, Portage, places, I think Crow Creek and so on. So they are covered with fire, but EMT is EMT is area wide. So everyone's covered fire, not everywhere, but most of the tax collections are in the fire service area. So it's really out of whack with the current experience when we know EMT calls are vastly more than fire calls. So it's not really legal or fair what we're doing now, and that needs to change some way. So I know Falsey's aware of that, but that's the trick. Where do you draw the line? But I'd like to see something done before next year's budget on that. Stormwater utility looms out there. DC lobbyist, I think, is from last year. I didn't make a note of that. For consultants, fire hydrants, who pays? It's an ongoing thing, water utility or the fire department. Revamp website. And we have a great opportunity for marketing because we have low C19. And I have friends who are going to go to Italy and they won't now. So maybe that's our hook. And then short-term rentals is a big issue in Girdwood, but I think also probably other parts of Anchorage too. And that's something that we need to look at as far as the bed tax, but also just impact on neighborhoods.
Cool. Thanks, John. Crystal?
Oh, thanks. First of all, I have to say that, yes, I did chuckle when I read John's new bumper sticker for getting people to visit Anchorage. But anyway, in talking about the split on property taxes between EMT and fire, I think that's a big deal. I think that's a really good issue to try to tackle. And I was going to ask John if he knows, can we do enough of the data finding on that to be able to do that all in-house? Or do you think there's some kind of a study we would have to pay for?
I can't answer that. When I'm trying to remember, but had discussions with Falsey and Shooty, and I think Jody was there, and we were just kind of rolling around. And where would you draw the line? Because a lot of it is blended. They all share the same fire stations. And so on. So how do you split those costs up? And no one had a clear answer. So it may be having someone not so close to it look at it would be helpful. That's a good point.
Thanks, Crystal. Thanks, John. Yeah, that'd be an interesting topic to explore. All right, anything else? Any other comments on economic development? Okay, so thanks everyone for all of your initial thoughts. I'm looking forward to the committee discussions in June, and then we'll do another round of this at the end of June, and I'm hoping, cross my fingers, that we get everyone to attend for that meeting. So moving on in our agenda to moving on in our agenda to assembly member discussion. Oh, sorry, I'm getting a loop feedback. So folks can make sure you're muted. Thanks. So moving on to assembly member discussion on pending business and update from committees on upcoming business. I'm going to go ahead and just combine those for purposes of time. And I think Jamie, you're back on with us. Or oh, okay. Looks like we might have lost Jamie again. So the rest of the members, though, are familiar with this process. So I am just going to go in order of the participant list. So I'm going to start with John. And you're muted, John.
There. What was the question again?
Not a question. We're on the part of the agenda where we do the roundtable on upcoming business or pending business.
Oh, you largely got it on my previous discussion. That's part of my work plan. I suppose there's other things in the works too, but yeah. So yeah, that was a pretty good outline there.
Great. Thanks, John. Agreed. Then next, Crystal.
Thanks, Felix. You know what? I'm just kind of doing things through committee, not anything specific on my end. So thanks.
Thanks. Suzanne?
Thanks, Felix. I feel like lately, most of the focus has been on the C-19 relief funding and now some of the alcohol tax funding questions. And sorry about the saxophone in the background. Everybody's working from home. And hopefully that's not too loud. So one of the things that I've been looking at for the budget committee is how can we show taxpayers and other stakeholders like the status of the muni spending, of the allocations, of our financial health. And it's in the early stages of research and looking at other tools that other cities use. And part of it is shaped by a number of the same questions that I've received over the years from constituents when it comes to the budget, when it comes to the tax cap, and how to provide some of that educational material in a format that's accessible. And it largely, of course, relies upon what we have available in terms of our website. So early stages, but definitely would welcome feedback. Thanks.
Thanks, Suzanne. Pete.
Thanks. Well, something we were talking about at the Ethics and Election Committee meeting the other day was whether we should get to the point where people don't have to put stamps on their ballots to mail them back, and doing a resolution encouraging the legislature to change the state code that says that a stamp is a thing of value. And so that is probably something I'm going to be working on with Dean. Well, that's another thing we should talk about when we're getting into budget discussions, is try to figure out, what exactly that might cost. And it's hard to tell, or because you don't know. Hopefully it'll only be a 1-page ballot. We had a 2-page ballot this year, which increases the postage and increases the cost of printing the ballot. But anyway, that's just something that recently came up that I'm going to be working on.
Great. Glad to hear, Pete. So a few things from me, busybody that I am. So first is, and I've talked about this at a previous rules committee, so the conversion therapy ban for minors, working on that with Chris, and planning on having that introduced on June 23rd, so look for that. I've been working with the Youth Advisory Commission on their work on climate change. It's a little bit slow going because of everything that's been happening, but it looks like they are continuing to work on development of their Youth Climate Change Advisory Council. And the Youth Advisory Commission is also wanting to focus on mentorship opportunities. So if any assembly members are interested, I'm sure they would really appreciate it. That would be, reach out to Ira in the mayor's office, and he would be able to connect you with the commission. I am going to begin working on a resolution just based on everything that's been happening recently around the country, stating our intent to build an overarching racial equity frame for our 2019-2021 priorities. So, think about it like the communications priority we have. It's not necessarily a standalone policy priority, but it's an overarching frame. So I am going to be working on a resolution just basically stating our intent that we want to develop something like this for our priorities. Also want to acknowledge that a lot of this work has been happening already. I've begun talking with public transit, the mayor's office, and the public transit advisory board about the idea of moving people mover and anchor rides to a fare free service. I'm really excited to see how we can move forward to make this a reality. And for me, I think the timing is perfect to consider these types of changes as public transit begins to reopen to the public. And then last, I've had some really good conversations over the last week with street maintenance and the administration on how snow plowing for sidewalks is prioritized. And sort of as a conversation I've been really having on and off for years, since 2015 when I worked in the mayor's office. Interestingly enough, at least according to street maintenance, the last time there was any type of committee or formal structure to determine priorities for snow plowing was in 1997 and 1998 with the old iteration of the Hazardous Routes Committee. After that, it's been pretty much any new road that gets built gets added onto the priorities. So I think it's probably opportune for us to revisit that. That is it from me. And no problem, Suzanne. I think your kids should always play sax in the background. John.
Hold on. Okay, I'm unmuted by accident. Oh, I just want to get something that I've been dealing with recently in a couple of cases is how to fix assessments that are clearly out of line. And we've got this kind of impossible loop for people where even if they go in early and say, hey, last year's assessment was out of line, here's what all my neighbors are, and kind of comparing things, and it's not, a few hundred dollars or dollars here or there, this is many thousands of dollars, and orders of magnitude of looks like excess. It doesn't lead to a change, and they say, well, if you don't like it, go to the Board of Equalization. So they go to Board of Equalization and find out that board can only critique, was the process done properly, and not really take into account any of the facts of the case of evaluation. And then it just sits. And for normal people, that just it doesn't work. There should be some more latitude and even encouragement of some point in that process for people to have a real honest, real capability to have their assessments looked at, and it just doesn't exist now. So I don't know where to go with that. I mean, I'm scratching my head and talk to Jack a bit, but it's something to think about.
Thanks. Yeah, no, that is a interesting conversation to engage in. Okay, so that is it for the roundtable. Let me just make sure we didn't have any other members pop in. Oh, so we do have Jamie is back. So Jamie, what we do during this part of the agenda, which if you're looking at the agenda, it's 3C and D, Assembly member discussion on pending business and update from committees on upcoming business. Basically, we do a roundtable where we talk about any things that are coming up sort of individually as Assembly members that we're thinking about. And then anything that's coming up in our committees that we lead. And this is mainly for us to be aware of the work that's going on, because I think that's important. We should be transparent with each other as much as we can. And then also offers opportunities for collaboration. So any of the stuff that I talked about, if members are interested in working on it with me, I'd be happy for them to join me. So did you want to add anything, Jamie?
Thank you. I had been popping off and on. I've been taking calls and I apologize. But yes, I kind of listening right now, Felix, trying to get a feel for how everything's being ran. But if I can just continue to kind of write down on my notes and then maybe come back with maybe questions I have for you later, if that's all right.
Absolutely.
Okay. It's difficult. I don't want to make excuses not to be able to be there with all you guys kind of face to face and be able to bounce off. This is a lot of virtual for me, and I know it's because of COVID-19. So I think it's just maybe a little bit slower for me to wrap my head around things. So I apologize to the team.
No problem. I'm looking forward to when we can do stuff in person again, which hopefully should be soon. I think that's actually on our agenda to talk about. Okay, so then moving on, next point in our agenda. So for other items, and apologies for not mentioning this earlier. So I have reordered a couple of things in the other items part of the agenda. So first, I just wanted to talk about next steps for our COVID-19 response. So, and I think for this one, I was hoping to have a sort of a lot more back and forth discussion, but I don't think we're gonna be able to do that with only half of the assembly on the line right now. But I'm happy for folks, if they want, after I'm done speaking, to add their comments, feel free to. It is my intent, as I stated in the email, that I'm going to be talking with you all over the weekend. So you can either do it now or we can just chat over the weekend. So thanks to everyone who hung in there for the many hours of virtual meetings that we had to talk through a lot of the different systems and populations which have been impacted by the pandemic. I think it was a productive series of dialogues. Now we need to talk about next steps. Jennifer emailed out some of my initial thoughts, and I hope everyone had a chance to read those. To expand a bit, we need to think strategically in how we allocate the funds heading our way, understanding that funding isn't the end-all or be-all solution for the issues that we are tackling, at least for some of them. We also need to respond to the immediate need that is literally kicking down our doors. Forewarning, I'm about to go into a little bit of systems and metaphor speak. So I hope this makes sense to everyone. So for me, our next phase of work looks like using what we have learned over the last 2 weeks as a foundation to build upon. We began building the core of that foundation when we had the discussion on our vision and values at the Special Rules Committee meeting of May 8th. Everything since this meeting has strengthened our foundation. So all of the other committee meetings, rules committee meetings, roundtables, they have all strengthened that foundation. We should use this foundation to build up. First, I would say, is our walls. And these walls need to be sturdy because we know that the status quo walls blew down like flimsy straw, which actually is a metaphor that I borrowed from Bill Popp, who used this during our meeting last Friday during the business roundtable. So that means building walls based on community outcomes that change the status quo. So based on our vision and values, what community outcomes do we want to achieve? That is an as yet unanswered question. The roundtables were organized based on the discussion of our vision and values and helped set the stage for what these community outcomes might look like. That is what led me to develop the lengthy list, and I'll admit lengthy, which was included in the email Jennifer sent out earlier today. So to wrap up, and then I'd like to hear from the body to make sure this is the direction we want to go, or we can just do that over the weekend. We need to determine community outcomes by delving deeper into the areas identified during our earlier roundtables and ensure that these outcomes include funding mechanisms to ensure we hit those targets. That is how we get out of status quo and actually move the system. I hope that made sense to everyone, but system speak rarely does. As an aside, I've been considering bringing in experts in systems thinking to talk with the assembly, but I haven't gotten around to it. We heard from some of these system experts during the roundtables in a more specific context, but this would be for a more general discussion without really focusing in or advocating on any specific policy. And this general discussion would be where we loop back on our values, visions, and priorities, right? Specifically the 2019-2021 priorities. We look at all of those things as a starting point for our next phase of work. So that is my sort of introduction of where I'm going to be looking at to take us for this next phase of COVID-19 response. I'm happy to do some brief comments if anyone wants to, but again, to repeat, I'm going to be talking to all of y'all over the weekend, I'm sure. So any brief comments or thoughts on that?
Hey, Felix, it's Suzanne.
Yeah, go ahead.
Just wanted to say thank you for assembling an incredibly vast array of speakers for these sessions, the work sessions that we held on this topic. And I appreciate all that information. It's going to take me some time to sort out some of the things I heard and process. So I do appreciate the time, to talk with you a little bit later as well. So thanks again, though, for doing that. That was a huge amount of work.
Thanks. Crystal?
Thanks, Felix. I want to do the same. I want to really echo what Suzanne said. And Felix, you did an amazing job. I don't know if you had any help in actually coordinating all the speakers, but I just was thinking about how many people there are that have, their hands in some part of something that's going on in the community. And it was really quite impressive. So you did a great job in putting all those people together. So I guess I'm thinking a little bit too. I need to really take all my notes. I've got pages of notes. There was a couple of things that really jumped out to me during the conversations, and I kind of want to take the time to synthesize some of that and to maybe just come up with my big the golden nuggets of that, the takeaways that are really worth trying to put into some kind of form that will help me in deciding how we really do spend money. So I do have a question though, and I don't know if you know the answer to this one or not. Has the municipality actually applied for any of the CARES Act funding at this point? Do you know if we've put any applications in for anything specific?
So I would need to turn to the administration on this one. I believe that we have, but I don't know definitively. The administration sort of has taught all these things, but I don't know if they've actually done it.
Okay, thanks. I can always email Lance too or something, so thanks.
Thanks. Any other comments or thoughts? All right, I'm really looking forward to continuing this work with everyone. And yeah, I think it is important that we take a little bit of time to think, synthesize, and then we need to figure out what's next. And that's going to be really critical. And I think, like I said in my comments, there is the sort of immediate need that is kicking down our doors that we need to move on. But then there's other things that I think we can maybe think more strategically, take a little bit more time to synthesize and think on. So looking forward to having those conversations with everyone. Moving on in our agenda, I'm actually going to flip the script a little bit. I want to start with assembly committees and work sessions in the phrase that we all love, the new normal. So the last time that I talked with assembly leadership, and by that I mean Barbara, Dean, Jennifer, Desiree, and Austin, we wanted to wait and see what the mayor was going to come out with in terms of protocols for folks coming to City Hall. That hadn't come out yet. Since that conversation, it has come out. And I think this was included in an email that Barbara sent out to everyone. But in short, that email said, something along the lines of, and I'm going to make an attempt at it, and then I'll ask you, Barbara, to maybe be a little bit more eloquent. But in short, after these protocols are developed and released by the administration, then it's going to take a little bit of time, not too long, a week, maybe two, for the clerk's office to organize itself. And then after that time, we'll be able to start thinking more about having in-person committees and work sessions. Obviously, I am going to simply provide guidance to committee chairs and co-chairs, vice chairs, and it will be up to the committees to determine how they want to move forward. Part of that guidance will likely be consideration for the staff that you rely on for your committees. How many people attend your committees, and some other considerations to take into account when you make your decision. I think the easier decision is going to be work sessions and how we can maybe start doing in-person work sessions, and perhaps even this committee meeting having it in person. I think that'll be probably an easier push than maybe some of the bigger committees like homelessness or CEDC, which meets in a smaller space. So with that, Barbara, did I miss anything on that?
No, Mr. Chair.
All right. Any discussion from anyone on that? Okay, so yeah, like I said, hopefully Now that the administration has put out its guidance, I'll put out our version of the guidance hopefully soonish. And then in another week or so, we can start making decisions about meeting in person again. So next item is wanted to do a couple of follow-ups and see if we have any comments. But again, there are a lot of assembly members who aren't here who were part of these conversations. Agendas for the last year or so of Rules Committee meetings. And there were two things in particular that I noted that I want to follow up on. So first was we've talked a lot in Rules Committee about the MOA, Municipality of Anchorage, and SOA, State of Alaska, relationship on transportation. And I think we had, I'd have to listen to the tapes, which I haven't done yet, but I think we had some type of idea of where we might want to go, and I want to follow up on that to see where we are going and if we need to maybe realign things a little bit. Second thing, follow up, is on naming panels. We did talk about that in Rules Committee more recently. Wanted to follow up on any work that we're doing on that. Before we talk about those two specifics, are there any other topics that we've talked about from previous Rules Committee meetings that folks want to follow up on? Like I said, I looked through all the agendas and I didn't see any other ones that were glaring, but maybe some of the other members have things that they remember.
Those are the big ones that stand out in my mind, Felix.
Thanks, Suzanne. I'll just give another little bit for folks to think. Okay, so if you guys have any other thoughts, let me know. But that would probably require listening to the hours of tapes over the last year, and I don't have time for that. So let's start with the follow-up on MOA SOA relationship on transportation. So I think primarily the three folks, there were a lot of folks who were interested in this, but I think three folks who were particularly interested were AMATS folks. So John was interested, Meg was interested, Chris was interested. I think Crystal was also interested, and Suzanne was interested. So that's five people who are interested in that topic. Three of you are here. Do any of you want to chime in on this topic?
Yeah, I could add some thoughts.
Yeah, go ahead.
I mean, it's a tricky thing. The philosophy between the kind of road building between the state and the city are somewhat different. I think they're merging a little bit as the state comes around, but the state is very much, move more cars faster, and the city is much more, broader thinking on what a road is for, and transportation in all its different forms and accommodating that. And it's an important difference. It doesn't necessarily mean you move less cars, though. We do kind of the Metropolitan Transportation Plan for the 20-year look ahead got 500 comments, and that's quite a lot in my experience. And most of them will be completely ignored in this version, because in the odd way of AMATs, if you make a change based on a public comment, you have to send it back to public comments. And I don't get it, but they insist that is the rule. So these 500 comments will, unless they're just tweaks and edits and the wording and so on, will largely be ignored in this version. But because we're so late, we've already started the next one, which is due in 3 years. So these 500 comments will kind of be the basis for the next version of the MTP. So it's not really hopeless. It's actually a lot of really good comments. I've only gone through about 150 or so of them, and but things are starting to point towards using our roads more for broader reasons in Anchorage, and more for economic development really than just moving cars. So that's a good news, but it's a really hard to move this. It takes a long time. We're looking years down the road to see changes. But that, as far as the plans go, that's where we are.
Got it. Suzanne or Crystal?
Well, I guess I have a question, Felix, and maybe John will be able to answer, since John, you've been involved with AMATs for a while. I guess I wasn't sure from our conversation about the MOA SOA relationship. I thought we were going to, since we don't really have a committee that it fits in, that the folks who are on AMATs would take up this issue. And so my question is that sufficient? Because it seems like, there are issues that come up that maybe don't fall in that purview of AMATs that are related to the state. I don't know. Can
I address that?
Yeah, if you're done, Suzanne, John, go ahead.
Yep.
It does kind of depend. I mean, whoever ends up on the AMATS committee kind of sitting there voting as the assembly. You've got two of us. And if just independent of who's on there now, if it's a wayward group or a very extreme one view or the other, then that will be the impact of the assembly on these hugely important plans that decide where the money is spent. And that the bottom line is, what it comes about. So I think it's good to have the broader assembly involved, but it's not necessarily, you're not going to be effective doing it like with monthly meetings, because it's where do you impact, to a large extent, the AMATS process, because even our future projects that we would bond as a city and do on our own without federal money, they're part of that process. So I think what we did as assembly was very impressive last time, is when it was the key time to comment on that plan, we did something I'd never seen before. It's had a very detailed, impactful comment. So that kind of process is meet at the different milestones in all these plans. And that really the way these things go would be a couple times a year, maybe 3 times, depending on where the plans are. So that might be a more effective use of our time, and just kind of keep notes on what you're interested in as we go along.
Yeah, Felix, this is Crystal.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I appreciate Suzanne's comments too, because I think for me it was that sense of frustration of not knowing exactly how to be effective, and knowing that the meetings were going on, having a sense that DOT just kind of ran the show and we could say what we wanted, but we probably didn't have a whole lot of influence. And that was frustrating, especially knowing that it was costing the municipality a lot of money that maybe we weren't really willing to pay. So I guess that's still my question. How do we kind of solidify our process to make sure that we are having the influence that we need? And how many of us does that take? How many times, well, like John just said, maybe twice a year, we need to be kind of looking at things and taking the pulse of what our real transportation needs are and what DOT is planning and how much we might be involved with that, to what level of expense. And so anyway, so I guess I would just still kind of look for that direction of how do we really solidify our processes for engaging in such a way that we have the kind of impact that we want to have. So thanks.
Thanks. Do you have any thoughts on that, John?
Yeah, I'm actually sitting here thinking it does get a little more complicated, because I think the bigger plans, but like we have a non-motorized plan that's in the works, and it's probably about a year late at this point. And ultimately, we will review that. It'll come to us to be adopted into the comprehensive plan, and but it's also an AMATS document. So that, but that'll come forward, and then I think there's a couple other plans that are being worked. They're independent of these bigger ones. That, but it's not something you really schedule. You kind of, those plans have a public outreach schedule, and when they're released for comment, we're part of it, and so it is a little tricky. Regular meetings wouldn't work, but being prepared to deal with these things in a timely way would be important. So I'm kind of thinking it's almost, yeah, I don't have to think about it. Ways to engage the kind of broader assembly earlier, because you're always more effective earlier, than later. It's like I said, comments now on this MTP are basically not going to happen. Anyway, that's big deal. Most of the money we spend building Anchorage is roads.
Thanks, John. Yeah, I
Felix,
guess.
can I ask another question?
Yeah, go ahead.
I just wanted to ask John if there's a good timeline for some of these on either DOT or AMAT's website. I mean, I know they all have websites, but is there a good timeline when we can expect some of these plans to be reviewed and when comments are due, or is that all just kind of done year by year? Do they keep any kind of a actual schedule for when these plans need to be out and be commented on?
They do, sort of, but like this MTP is over a year late already. So we'll be, I think, 18 months when we get it to, FHWA in October. So the things slip, and that's the issue. And like a non-motorized plan is super late, it's over a year late. So, I mean, they go in with the deadlines, and we ultimately will have them presented to us, and I think typically with 30-day notice or so, to be considered as adopting into our comprehensive plan. So we do, and all of them have an input. But I think as I sit here, I'm thinking, a key thing would be to let members know earlier, okay, well, this is the first time, because we can comment during the general public comment, the first round, because they will do a public review draft that gets public comment, and they turn that into the public hearing draft, which is the one that goes to Planning and Zoning Commission and then to us, which we can then comment. Everyone can comment on it as it comes to us. So there's two big public comment times, and we can, as an assembly, look at it at that first time, the public review draft time. It'd be unusual, but I think you're more effective doing it then, because if it's totally going the wrong direction, you get to say it at that point, rather than saying it 6-7 months later, when it may be absolutely not the way you want things to go. And those things, you get a lot of email lists with the AMAT staff. Watch for those things. At this point, that's the way it goes. But it could be, I mean, as I sit here, having sat on the AMATS committee, it's, maybe I should just be announcing that to everybody. And I will begin doing that, at certain, earlier times to comment.
Well, I would appreciate that, because I certainly don't want to be caught unaware or get making comments at the last minute. So, I mean, it sounds like we have ample opportunity to comment. I just want to make sure that we do it when it's most effective. So,
right.
Thanks, John. Thanks.
Thanks, John. Thanks, Crystal. I guess to add my own comment on this subject, and just going back to sort of some of the systems talk that I did on the COVID-19 stuff, to me, if the goal sounded like when we first talked about this months ago, so my memory might be off, but the goal sounded like trying to see if there's a way that we could sit down with the state and have them reassess their own way that they think about projects, particularly within the Anchorage area. And, we have our sort of vision and values for how we think about projects within Anchorage, right? Complete streets and all these other models that we overlay on how we do projects within the municipality. The state has a completely different vision and values. And I think the reason for this conversation was the conflict there. So I think I do think the comments, and the earlier we can comment, the better. But I feel like we're going to be repeating so many of the same comments over and over and over again. I think a more productive use would be to just snip it from the very beginning and see if we can align the state more with the municipality's vision and values for how we do our roads. So I guess that's my just 2 cents on it. Maybe we could work a little bit on both parts. I'll leave that up to the experts.
Could I chime in? Do we have time or are we done?
This goes until 4:10, so I think we're gonna finish this up. We'll leave the follow-up on naming panels for a future meeting and do public comment.
Okay, can I follow up on your comment?
Yeah, go ahead, John.
Okay, I think there's a real valid point, Felix. An example is, when they do, when the state does a road like O'Malley, they'll do one pathway and they do lighting only at intersections. And that's the way they do it. Whereas if the city were to do that, the city would do pathways on our plans say we do wider shoulders, pathways on both sides, and we do continuous lighting. And the state is not opposed to that. They just want us to pay if we're going to add those things on. So, and I'm not ready to say that's unreasonable, but that's kind of the broader place where we are. So that would be, we would need to come willing to pay and then early enough to get those things in the design. And that's a lot of money, but not unsolvable.
Thanks, John. So unless there's any other final thoughts, I'm going to move us on to audience participation. So I think we have one member of the public here to participate, and I'm going to assume that is Mr. Haberman.
Oh, how did you guess? Okay, you can hear
go
me?
ahead, Mr. Haberman. Welcome to the meeting. You have 3 minutes.
Welcome to the meeting. You have 3 minutes. I just pulled over. I got my timer. My name is Eugene Carl Haberman, Alaska resident for over 42 years, 20 years a resident in Anchorage, and approximately 20 currently resident in the Valley. Where do I go? I attentively listen to your meetings, and my comments are strictly almost all on this particular meeting. A key to know about where you're going in a meeting is the agenda. The public's totally blind. Where is the agenda? I note there's the 1218. I took a copy, photostat, a copy of the notice, and there was no documents there. But sometime I saw documents appear later on during this meeting. But it wasn't the agenda, and it wasn't any reference to many of the emails that you said you sent among yourselves and major documents. So the public was in the dark, and as a member of the public, I'm concerned about the lack of transparency. My email address is eugene@mtaonline.net, eugene@mtaonline.net, and I'm requesting that all emails that you made reference to the meeting that were sent among yourselves and not to the public be sent on to me. And you have my email address. But I also want to stress this thing, and by the way, I did appreciate the comment about keeping open the way you're doing things in the regular assembly meeting by allowing people to call in. I would encourage you to keep on doing that. Have that option there along with the option for people to physically attend the meeting. But I also want to address concern here. The idea of social distancing. You cannot run meetings when you start opening up. I'm not talking about the assembly chambers, but I'm talking about the mayor's conference room, the small rooms downstairs, the committee rooms, wherever you've been meeting outside of the main assembly chambers. You need to stop it because that's not practical social distancing. It also makes it distant from the people. You need to have it in the main assembly chambers and for all those meetings and staff, and that would be the appropriate way, particularly now that we are in a world health emergency. It's not going away. It's going to be with us, and we need to show that respect and concern. And I got to check my timer here. 39 seconds to spare, but note this. There was reference by Pearson about an Assembly Ethics Selection Committee meeting that was this week. I called in I witnessed over for 20, 30 minutes problems with the linkage, and they're starting the meeting. And the sound went dead. I called back in, and I was never connected to that meeting. So here's an example. I'm concerned about the technology of the meetings and the public's in the dark. And in closing this thing, on the documents for this meeting, I said about public notice, there's a kill date on when that's removed. The end result is those documents are not going to be out there, and the end result, it ends and it gets destroyed. So that's another problem with those documents that you have now. And my time's up according to my timer. And thank you, and I wish you all the best.
Thank you.
Thank you.
If you could mute your, thank you. All right, I'm not seeing any other members of the public. Thanks, everyone. It's been a long few weeks of meetings, and I'm sure we'll have a lot more to do. Enjoy your.
Thanks, Felix.
Good weekend, everybody.